All right, so in this example, we're going to look at generating a scale bar and manipulating it. So I already have a map layout. It's got a north arrow and a scale bar already. So I'm just going to make one of these scale bars from scratch and then just talk about options for editing it. Just to make things a little easier, I'm just going to move these frames out of the way because we're again just working with the scale bar here. The map is kind of irrelevant for the example. So I'm just going to move some of this ancillary stuff out of the way. All right, so let's get rid of this and this for now. So we have a map and we like to add a scale bar. So first thing, if you have multiple map frames in the same layout, you're going to need to make sure you're clicked on the correct frame. So whatever you're clicked on is what the scale will be, or north arrow, whatever, or legend would be referenced against. So if we clicked on this, we're going to get a scale bar for this inset as opposed to the main map. All right, so anyway, let's look at that. So click on this, and so that's the main map. And then if we're in insert, we should be able to go to scale bar. And as you see here, there's a bunch of defaults. There's metric and imperial, or like US. Note that it really doesn't matter. Like if you pick a imperial or a metric, you can switch the units afterwards. So it doesn't really matter that much. All right, so let's pick one that's somewhat complicated. So let's we'll grab this one. And then it allows you to draw it. So I'm going to draw a space for it. And there's our default setup. Okay, so a couple things to get started. First, it's really good to have your scale bar have nice numbers, right? So instead of it stopping at like 3.6, it might make more sense for it to stop at 3 or 4 or 5 miles or something, right? So that's the first thing. There's lots of things you can edit with this. You can change the label, the intervals, the colors. So we're going to look at a couple examples of that. Okay, so when you're clicked on an object, like a map object, you should get some format or design tabs up here that are associated with it. So you can see this is labeled scale bar. So we have options here for formatting and designing scale bars. Okay, so first off, let's go under format and see what options we have. Okay, so couple options. You can change the default or the scale bar reference if you want. Try out a couple different ones. We really need to do that. You can change the font. Generally, I think it's good to have all of your at least ancillary text, like your legends and scale bars and citations and whatnot, title, to have the same font. So I'm just going to change this to Tahoma for now. You can change the size, obviously. Just bump that up a little bit, and you can change the bold, italic, regular. Change the color. Okay, so now let's look at doing some other changes. In this symbol window, there are options here to change the stroke color. So right now it's set to black. So that we could maybe, for example, drop it down a little bit so it's a little more gray. The fill, I believe, let's do a lighter gray maybe. Oh, see, that's different for each one. So that one we might have to do differently. So I'm going to do Control Z to get that back, and we'll play with that at the end. And then the width, I believe, has to do with the width of the bars. Oh, that's the width of the stroke, sorry. So you can change that. Probably just leave that at the default. Okay, so anyway, those are some just simple options for changing the text and whatnot. Okay, so let's go to the design window now. And there's a lot of options here. So right now we have 4 divisions and 4 subdivisions. We have units specified and positions for the measurements and whatnot. So I'm just going to change this to kilometers to get different units. Kilometers. And I'm also going to change the label. So instead of it being kilometers, I'm just going to put km. And then you can also change the position. So for example, we could have it be like below and center. We could have it be to the right. So anyway, there's tons of positions. There's 2 positions. So I'm just going to do below and center. Below labels, below center. So that puts it down there at the bottom. All right. The frequency has to do with the markings. So first off, we can change let's look at the labels. So by default, it's division and first midpoint. So we could change this to divisions, and it gets rid of that first midpoint. I generally prefer that, but there's reasons why you can also leave it. It's not really that big of a deal. And then you can change the position of the labels. So for example, that puts it inside the bar, which for this legend really wouldn't make sense. You could put it below. I'm just going to leave it at above bar because I think that works. So you can change the position. Okay, you can also use fractal characters. So instead of instead of decimals, you get fractions. I'll just leave that. I think that looks pretty nice. Okay, so I think that looks reasonable. If you want to change the length, you can just kind of drag it. Can be a bit touchy. See if we could get it around. Well, we'll just leave it at 6. If you wanted, you could obviously play with it and be more precise. But I think that looks reasonable. Okay, and then let's look at the divisions real quick. So if you wanted, you could increase the number of divisions. I think that actually looks kind of nice. Subdivisions, that's how many are going to show up here in this first. So we could, if we increase that to like 8, we're going to get 8 little boxes down there, which is probably too many. So we'll just leave that at 4. Okay, and then let's look at the markings. So this is the markings above. So there I've added some at the ends, at the divisions and first subdivision. I'm just going to leave this at divisions. So we get little markings there at each division. All right. And I think that'll work. I don't really think there's much else we would need to do. This resize behavior is interesting. So whenever you change the size, you adjust the number of divisions, adjust the values, adjust divisions and the values, adjust the width. So there's lots of options there. The default is adjust the division values. All right, you can also show a division before the 0 if you wanted. I don't think that's necessary in this case, so we'll turn that off. Okay, so let's say we're pretty much happy with that. Let's go back to the formatting. See if there's anything else we want to change. I think this looks fine, so I think we'll just leave it there. So now let's say we're done with this and we want to do some additional editing, but we will have to do that as a graphic. So before you start editing this as a graphic, make sure you're done with the map, because once you convert it to a graphic, you no longer can, it will no longer be dynamic or adjust with the map. So if you change the scale bar won't update and it will be incorrect. Okay, so click on the scale bar here and you can see it's highlighted there in the contents. And now I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to do convert to graphics. Okay, and you can see it's got some components there underneath of it, and then let's do an ungroup to ungroup all the components. And you should be able to even ungroup all the subcomponents if you want. Okay, all right, so now we can edit this as a graphic. So like for example, maybe we can move this back to the end if we wanted. We could, if you wanted, maybe we could increase the font size a bit. A lot of this stuff is in multiple windows, as you may have noticed. Oh, it's set as a group. So I guess, let me see, we might need to ungroup this more. Okay, I'm not really sure why that needed ungrouped more, but apparently did. So we can change this bit to the text symbol, and if we wanted, we can bump up the size a little bit. Okay, and then let's look at just like editing the graphic components. So there's the bar. So you can see that it's broken up into components now. So let's say we want to change that collar. So let's just bump it down a notch. And we can just jump through all these and change the collar. So as you can see here, you actually have a lot of control over the look of these things. And you know, if you get to a point where you can't edit it or anymore, you can always convert to a graphic. And if you want to do even more editing, you can always there we go. So you can always export it out and do some additional editing in your graphic software. Okay, and then lastly, I want to just we could fiddle with the fonts a little, or the labels a bit. So let me go back to format here, and should be able to select them all. There we go. You can also do selections from the legend too. So let's change this to the dark color to match with that. And then the ticks, oh yeah, those look okay. All right, so there we go. So that's a pretty, I mean, that's probably overly complicated, but I mean, just the goal here was to show you a lot of options for editing your scale bar.